Welcome to the Build Review. This is a series where my community submits builds to me and I do a deep dive on them. Now, whether you actually need help with your build, or you're just trying to flex on me with your 100 Exalt 20 million DPS build, or you just want to send me a friendly Salutations Exile with your high investment meme build that can barely clear maps, all of those are welcomed here. For more information on how you can submit your build for review, join my Discord, which is linked down below, and find the channel called Build Review. Now, without further ado, let's get on to the video. We've got Amvi's Spellslinger Volatile Dead build. So first thing I always like to do is take a look at the notes and see if they've given us anything. So in this one, it just looks like, just looking if there's any decent tweaks that could be done. Next level's thinking of filling out Thread of Hope and replacing Tabula with Spore Guard for explosions. Okay, so he's got the Thread of Hope here that he talked about. Looks like he's using one set of cluster jewels. It also looks like he's using the Lone Messenger version of this. So this is probably the Herald of Ash version. It looks like he's life-based, and he's using the Might of the Meek combo jewels here. So this combination is pretty interesting for anybody who's wondering about it. Might of the Meek increases the effect of non-keystone passive skills in the radius. So the big notables like this generally grant nothing, and the little notables that are in the radius grant quite a bit. So with the Might of the Meek here, it hits everything except for Constitution here, right? But it's all of this stuff around it. So all of this life here that it's hitting, all gives you a ton of life because it's being increased by 100%, as well as these resistances here. Sentinel doesn't have any effect, but this is a good way to get a ton of life out of this little section here, right? So first off, let's take a look at the actual skills themselves before we go deep diving into the tree. I can already kind of tell that, judging by the way that this looks, there's not going to be a lot of tweaks that I can make to this. This looks about correct for this build, but we'll see if we can figure anything out. We'll just go over it, and if there's nothing that we can really do to tweak the build, we'll just kind of talk about how it works. So we'll take a look at the skills. So we've got Flame Dash and Steel Skin. So Flame Dash is his main movement ability. Steel Skin is good because he doesn't have very much armor, most likely. And this is the best alternative that you can get for armor builds, especially ones that don't have endurance charges. So that's fine. Looking at Spellslinger, so this is his main Volatile Dead link. He's got Spellslinger, Volatile Dead, Inspiration, So he's probably using Inspiration with the Wand and Barrage. We'll see that in a moment. He's got Elemental Focus, Concentrated Effect, and Spell Cascade. Okay, so these look like pretty typical links. The Inspiration is interesting. We'll see if he's using that with his Wand ability to proc it. There's a lot of weird small interactions with this build that all kind of work together, because you're never actually physically casting Volatile Dead, you're just having it proc off of Spellslinger. So there's a lot of little things that you can do to optimize that. He's probably making use of some of those here. So he's got Barrage, and yes, it looks like he's using Barrage with Combustion and Inspiration. So the main source of him getting the Inspiration stacks is going to be from this Barrage attack that he's doing here. So as he's attacking with the wand, he's stacking up the Inspiration stacks, and that's going to make his Volatile Dead do more damage. He's also using Combustion on the attack, which is another good thing that you can do. This is mainly useful for bosses because you can just use the Barrage and the Combustion will apply. The enemies ignited by supported skills have 19 minus to fire resistance. So that will apply to the boss, and then the Spellslinger will get the benefit of that. So it's just kind of a win-win in a link that you can put in here. Alternative option to Combustion would be Power Charge on crit if you're going crit and you don't want to try to get those in a different way, but this is definitely a good way to get that. Looks like we've got Vol Righteous Fire, good skill that you can use on pretty much any fire-based build. You don't even have to be a fire-based build, honestly. Vol Righteous Fire is just kind of a solid ability, especially for spell builds. And we've got Portal, we've got Enhance, and we've got Herald of Ash. So it looks like the Enhance is mainly for the Portal gem, and I mean potentially the Herald of Ash. I don't think that the quality on the Herald of Ash really does very much. Interesting that he's decided if he's just going the one Herald. Okay, so anyway, so he's got the Herald of Ash. This is his one Herald, it looks like. It looks like this is just the main one that he's focusing on for the build, especially with the Lone Messenger. And it looks like he's using a couple of the Herald gems as well here. All right, let's keep going. This just looks like to be a weapon swap. So this is where he's getting his Desecrate. So the way that Spellslinger works in particular is that every time that you attack with a wand, it casts all of the abilities that you have linked with a Spellslinger anywhere, right? So what he has is he has Spellslinger linked to Desecrate. And with Spellslinger linked to Desecrate, it means that he's going to be, every time that he attacks, he's going to be creating corpses through Desecrate. And then on top of that, he's also going to be exploding those corpses with the Volatile Dead. So that means that as he attacks with Barrage over and over and over again, he's spawning corpses and actually proccing the Volatile Dead off them constantly. So with Spells Cascade, it gives him a few more bodies for the Desecrate. Concentrated Effect. I guess that just makes it more localized. I don't know that Concentrated Effect is that useful here. I don't think the Desecrate's doing very much damage. I'm not sure about the Concentrated Effect. Maybe it just localizes them closer to the enemy that you're trying to hit. That's about all that I can think of. I don't know that this is useful. And then we've got Flammability, Wave of Conviction, and Bone Offering in his weapon. I'm going to guess yes, so this is another thing that's very common in this build. They use a wand that has trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill. So every time you're attacking with that barrage, this is also casting Flammability, which is his curse, Wave of Conviction, which gives us the exposure to fire because he's going to be mainly doing fire damage, and it's going to be casting Bone Offering, which is his main offering. The big thing about Bone Offering is that because he is a Necromancer, he has Mistress of Sacrifice, which is going to make his offering skills also affect him. This is going to give him a ton of block. And that looks to be it for skills, so let's move on next to the items. So he said in particular that he was going to be changing out the Tabula most likely. So he's got a level 2 to socketed AoE gems Tabula. Now he said that he wanted to change it over to Spore Guard. Another option that might be good for this build would be Carcass Jack, I feel. Carcass Jack will give quite a bit of AoE. So Carcass Jack will give us some life, it'll give us some elemental resistances to make gearing a bit easier. It'll also give us a ton of area damage and a ton of area of effect. So this is probably pretty good for clear as well. I don't know, so I think he was talking about Spore Guard, right? So Spore Guard is an interesting chess piece. The biggest thing about swapping over to Spore Guard or Carcass Jack is that he's no longer going to have the +2 to level of socketed AoE gems, which is huge, right? So I think that one big thing to think about here is that when you're swapping over, it might be a little bit difficult to get that corruption, especially on a Carcass Jack. A +2 AoE corruption on a Carcass Jack is going to be insanely expensive. Spore Guard might not be as expensive. However, Spore Guard doesn't give us as much life. It does give us a decent amount of armor, and it gives us that, you know, enemies explode and create fungal ground, and then deal 5% of their life as chaos damage. So the explodey chest piece portion of Spore Guard is pretty decent. Of note, the part that says trigger level 10 contaminate when you kill an enemy, that creates fungal ground. So when you kill something, it creates the fungal ground that allows everything else to explode on. It also gives you fungal ground underneath you when you're not moving, so that helps quite a bit there. Carcass Jack might be a bit more expensive, but I think in the end it may end up being overall a better choice. But yeah, you're gonna probably want to be getting the +2 AoE implicit corruption there, and that might be really expensive. So let's go down the list on his items. So as we talked about before, he's got a wand. Now Spellslinger adds the added damage on the wand to your spells themselves. So it's really good here to be able to get fire damage either added to attacks or to spells. I personally feel that added to spells is more ideal because the added to attacks has a percentage that it adds to, whereas spells is going to be just straight damage to the spells. I think that spell damage is better. I don't think that it's really great to utilize the added like 1-to-1 attack of it, but if you can get both, it's good. Here in this one, it looks like he's just got fire damage, spell damage. He does have the fire damage to spells. It's much easier to get on one of these wands. And then he's got gain 6% of fire damage as extra chaos damage. That's actually pretty huge. And then he has the trigger a socketed spell that we use on a skill that we talked about before that helps him proc like his curse and the Wave of Conviction and his offering. So that's a really good way to proc those abilities. It looks like he's going for just an overall solid gain fire as chaos damage, life, elemental resistances, and some block on his shield. This build looks to be surviving quite a bit off of block, so that's probably a pretty solid amount of block. Block builds are generally pretty good, and with this build having 6,000 life, what's the block chance? Yeah, he just has 50% block chance base and 40% spell block chance, so that's huge, right? That's a big layer of defense there. The next is his helmet. So he's got skills supported by Spellslinger have 15% reduced mana reservation. Interesting. So he's got 13% unreserved mana. One thing about this build that this might be a potential upgrade. It's got +2 to level of socketed minion gems. Is he slotting, what is he slotting in his helmet? He has the Spellslinger Desecrate. It doesn't really matter that that it's got that +2. I don't actually think that does very much for it because it's just Desecrate, but the Spellslinger has 15% reduced mana reservation is interesting. I'm wondering if we took that off, how much mana he would have. So let's sort this, and we've got Armageddon Dome is what we're looking for. So if we took off the crafted implicit here, we took this off, and then we saved it, and we saved that here. Let's see here. We took that off. How much mana does he have left? -2. Okay, so that's not something that we're going to be able to do for right now. It looks like he's managing around that. If we take out concentrated effect here, which I think is probably for the best, honestly, then we're back up to 8% mana and we don't need that enchantment. What I would say is that this is one thing that could be done, right? You have to get a new helmet, obviously, because it's going to be really hard to just get this enchantment. But if we go to Spellslinger, the increased cooldown recovery speed is probably going to be quite a bit better for this build in particular. Increased cooldown recovery speed is huge. You'd have to modify the attack speed and everything if you've already got that set, but if you removed concentrated effect from this skill here, this Spellslinger here, there's not really much of a reason to have concentrated effect, right? It would only just make the Desecrates happen in closer together. So I mean, if you really want that, that's fine, but Desecrate isn't really doing any damage. So I would say that's probably a good thing that you can potentially swap out here. It's kind of a high-end change that isn't really going to do a ton for the build, but that cooldown recovery will be somewhat noticeable, definitely. So that's one thing that could be done, right? So we could change that body or that helmet out for a different enchant, right? So now it's got the 30% cooldown reduction on here, so that would be quite good. We already kind of talked about the tabula. You could get either Carcass Shack or a Spore Guard. You kind of do want that. Corruption though to be able to switch off of the tabula comfortably, or you're really going to notice that change in damage. Let's keep going down. This here looks to be a essence crafted item. It's got socketed gems, has 16% more attack and cast speed. Most likely his attack is in his gloves. Yeah, so this is allowing him to have a much faster attack, right? So he's got barrage faster attacks, and then his gloves are giving him 16% more attack speed for the socketed gem. In combination with the new enchantment on the helmet, this may be better used, right? Because now he's got a ton of attack speed. And the thing about this build is that with the use of this right here, where is it? Corpse Pack, you get 2% increased attack and cast speed for each corpse consumed recently. This can scale recursively almost. It gets to the point where you attack so constantly and you spawn so many corpses that you just start attacking like 10, 20 times a second. It's insane, right? So I think that that's quite a big boost to the damage, just changing that enchantment on the helmet, if you can get it, right? So let's keep moving on. So let's take a look at the boots here. So it looks like he is getting cooldown recovery speed on his boots, and he sacrificed a lot of resistances for that. His resistances actually look pretty good, but Carcass Shack would be good here. This would actually give him a little bit more cushion for his resistances, so he wouldn't have to worry so much. But cooldown recovery is big for this build, so that's good. Looking at the amulet, he's got minus cost of non-channeling skills. That probably helps him use his attack. He's got Arcane Guarding is his anointment. Where is that? Arcane Guarding is here. Interesting. So Arcane Guarding is pretty cheap, so that's probably fine. We'll talk about that in a minute though. Other than that, it looks like he's just getting life. He's got fire damage leached as life, which is pretty good. And he's just got resists and stats. Let's see here. Moving on, he's using the Circle of Anguish ring. So he's got increased fire damage while affected by Herald of Ash and reduced mana reservation of Herald of Ash there. Increased Herald of Ash buff effect and +1 to maximum fire resistance while affected by Herald of Ash. Now, obviously there's an easy upgrade here, and that's going to be Herald of Ash, ones that give you increased buff effect plus the fire damage. But those are insanely expensive. You could easily replace this one. Yeah, you're gonna lose 1% maximum fire resist, but that doesn't really matter that much, to be honest. 1 fire resist is not gonna do very much. You could just replace this with a little bit better one, and it would be a huge amount of money, but that is an upgrade that could be made. As for the belt, we've got a cooldown recovery, huge amount of life and resist belt. There's not really much else to be done here. He's just got the crafted cooldown recovery. Once again, cooldown recovery is great for this build. Not much else to say here. And moving on to the flasks, these just look like pretty standard flasks. He's got the physical defense here. Cinder Swallow is huge for pretty much any build that does fire or ignite. Of note, this is only going to work the enemies ignited by you. This is only going to work by his attack because he is using elemental focus with his Spellslinger Volatile Dead. So this isn't actually going to be able to ignite. However, on bosses, it will still work. I don't know that there's a different gem that we can swap out for elemental focus here. It's got concentrated effect, it's got inspiration, because this is 45% more elemental damage. So let's see here. Removing this takes off 29,000 to the average hit. And Controlled Destruction adds 40,000 to the initial hit. That actually might end up being better. Are we crit? No, we're not crit. So we could just go Controlled Destruction maybe. Here, let's test it. So let's turn both of these off. And let's see, this adds 27, that adds 29, no. So there is one slight optimization that might be better here. Keep in mind this is a level 20 Controlled Destruction, this is only 19, so this is 31, this is 27. If we give this quality as well, just like that one's got, this is 28, this is 31. So there is a very slight clear optimization here that might happen, and it's only because of Cinder Swallow Urn. So if we switch over from Elemental Focus to Controlled Destruction, this will have a slight chance to ignite. I'm not sure how much ignite chance it actually is going to have, but if there is enough ignite chance here, depends on what your ignite chance is going to be. If you have a chance to ignite with that, which we may not, it may be halfway decent to swap that out. Let's actually check Awakened Controlled Destruction. Because it did say, oh, there's also Awakened Elemental Focus. Let's put on both of these here. So removing all of these, so this gives us 30,000, that gives us 28. What if we put quality onto this? 31, 28, 31. So obviously Awakened Elemental Focus is probably just going to be another upgrade that we can make. That's 35 compared to 31. Honestly, not that much different though. So these are probably not worthwhile. So it looks like his links are mostly fine. If there is any chance of being ignited, it looks like cursed enemies have a 13% chance to be ignited by fire damage here. It may be better to swap over to Controlled Destruction just so you can actually ignite them. Minor optimization, and it doesn't actually help for boss clear, so that is one thing that could be done. Let's keep going. So other than that, Quartz Flask for phasing and some dodge, and he's got a Quicksilver. Perfectly fine. So Calamitous Visions, this is going to give us a pretty big buff to the Herald, right? It looks like the main thing that he's working on here is going off of the Herald of Ash and making the Herald of Ash as strong as possible. So this gives us 50% more effective Herald buffs on you, which means that Herald of Ash is going to be giving us more fire damage, and it's going to be giving us, let's see here, because this gives us more burning damage, more fire damage, more spell fire damage, right? So this is going to be giving us more effectiveness of all of that. And it's also going to be giving us more damage over time with the Herald skills. The damage over time should affect the Herald of Ash Ignite, like overkill buff that happens, should affect that as well. And that looks to be about it. So you can't use any auras with this. However, we don't need auras because we're already reserving all of our mana through Spellslinger. So there's that. We talked about Might of the Meek a little bit. There's not really much more to say here. This just helps him abuse that little section of the tree that gives him some resist and some life. Just some large cluster jewels here. This is the one that we were talking about earlier. We'll take a look at the cluster jewels. So he's got Burning Bright, which fire damage over time multiplier, increased area of effect on fire damage. Honestly, the fire damage over time multiplier isn't helping him, but fire damage and area of effect is pretty good. We've got Sadist, which he is chilling, he is shocking, and he is igniting. Sadist is awesome for this build. Then he's got Doriani's Lesson. This gives him a little bit of leech and some elemental damage. Solid choices here. Burning Bright may be able to be swapped out for something else, but there's not really a lot that's going to be better here. So other than that, it looks like he has 2 medium jewels, and they're doing Empowered Envoy and Heraldry. This is Endbringer and Heraldry. So these are increased damage for each Herald affecting you, increased effective Herald buffs on you, and 10% reduced mana reservation. This one, I'm not sure if it is too insanely useful, but there's probably not much else that can be done. Probably Empowered Envoy would be better than Endbringer if you can get another Heraldry and Empowered Envoy. I don't actually think that Endbringer is that great. I think the increased effect of the Herald buffs on you is going to be better than just 25% increased damage, right? Most likely. Actually, no, the Endbringer seems to be more overall damage when we're looking at the numbers. But this also gives the Herald skill overkill more damage as well. So it's kind of a toss-up, but it's fine either way. They're probably not too relevant. He's got a Fettle here for life and some chaos resistance. And then other than that, Lone Messenger. That's pretty much it for the actual cluster jewels here. He's using a Thread of Hope, so we can talk about Thread of Hope a little bit. Thread of Hope, the way that it works is that it just allows you to allocate passes in the tree in this giant ring that you see here without having it linked. He has most everything already linked in here. We could get some more mana reservation here. What level is he? 86, so he could level up a couple more times. We could get some more mana reservation here, which would help him have just more mana to reserve more things if he wanted to. It looks like he's already got the Spiritual Aid here. Not really much useful there. He's not using a staff, so neither of these are very useful. He could fill in one more node here. Could fill in this mana node if he really wanted to. I don't think he wants to. He's already got the life there. He could grab Amplify, which would be good. So Amplify could be gotten. That'll probably be next, as he spoke of. So it's basically these two nodes, and Amplify is all he's really looking to fill in here, and maybe this one. Nothing else here is too useful. So continuing down, that's his medium cluster jewel. He's got the Might of the Meek, and he's got the Lethal Pride. So Lethal Pride, this is the one that he's getting Glancing Blows. Let's actually look this up real quick. Lethal Pride, because I'm not 100% familiar with what this Lethal Pride does. So this is Glancing Blows. So Glancing Blows, I'll put it on the screen here if I remember to. Chance to block attack damage is doubled, and chance to block spell damage is doubled. You take 50% of damage from blocked hits. Currently what that means is that he has 50% block chance. That means that currently he has 100% chance to block with this. He also has 80% chance to block with spell damage. But normally when you block, you take none of the damage, right? But instead, you're just going to take half of the damage. So basically, this is removing half of the damage that he's taking, and it's a huge source of defensives, right? So Glancing Blows is pretty huge for this build. It's mainly focused on block. So he's got maximum block chance, which means that he's going to be taking 50% of the damage from blocked hits. He's going to be having just a 50% solid DR going there. Blocking an attack prevents all damage and harmful effects, so he's just going to be taking half damage. That's basically 50% DR. That's pretty huge. So absolutely very, very tanky build. That's very, very strong. That's going to be it for items, so let's do a little bit of a look at the skill tree here. So we talked a little bit about how he could fill in some points here. That's kind of what he was talking about next. There's not much else to be done on this section. He's got life and chaos resistance here, which is good. He's got a lot of points here built into the cluster jewels. There's not much that I can change here. Elemental Overload is good here. He has a low crit chance, but he's hitting so often that he probably is keeping this up 100% of the time. He's got life. He's abusing these jewels here for Might of the Meek. There's not really a ton that we can do to make this any better. This is a huge investment of points, but it is quite worthwhile if he's just mainly looking to get life. There's not a way for him to get more life on the tree than what he's doing here with these points, basically. Other than that, he's got some minion damage. He's got, this is the only node here. This is the only thing that might be better, right? It might save him some points, maybe. So these nodes coming up to this are 15% fire damage here, right? And these nodes over here give us some block recovery. It gives us spell damage. This gives us spell damage as well. This gives us some more chance to block spell damage. So he could come over this way, right? So if we got, say, if we went, instead of taking these 2 points, right, and this point here, what you could do, this is a very minor upgrade, but you could take these 3 points, right, and you could swap them out for these 3 points. You could come up here and grab these 3 points as well. This is going to give us 12, 10, and 10 instead of 12, 15, 15, and 15. So we lose 15% here, but we're gonna gain up most of that right here. We would gain we would click Arcane Garden, or guarding, sorry. This would let us cap out that spell block just a little bit more. So instead of that 4, it's gonna be 48. But yeah, so we'd end up being at 44, we'd be at 88, right? Instead of 44. So give us a little bit more spell block, similar spell damage, and you could save 1 point here. I don't know that it's 100% worth it, but basically what you would do is you would take out all of these points now, and then you would get Heart of Flame through an Anointment. That's probably not even that great of an optimization, right? You'd just be trading some spell block for just some basically less damage. So That's the only thing that I can really even see on this tree that might be worth doing, but probably and most likely not. There's not really much else to do there. Other than that, I'm pretty sure his configurations are good. Doesn't use power or frenzy charges. This is something that he could do, but he's not really basing his tree off of crit. There is a crit version of this build that doesn't go down here and get this life. It goes over to the right side of the tree, and it grabs like the spell crit here. It's more of a hybrid build that uses life and energy shield. So it is a little bit less tanky, but it's a hybrid, so you just need chaos resistance when you use a hybrid build, so we'd have to focus more on chaos resistance. You would basically just hard cut off all of these points here, right? You just unclick this, take all of these points, you'd move them over into this side of the tree, you'd grab all the crit here, you'd grab power charges, you'd grab this crit here, you'd grab this power charge, and then you would probably put like, maybe instead of something else here, like I don't know where you would get it, but you would find some source of power charges, like you could do, maybe instead of combustion here or something, you could do power charge on crit, or you could find a way to get power charges, right? Maybe swap out faster attacks or something, I'm not sure. But you could do that, and that would be a crit version of the build. It probably does more damage, but it isn't going to be as tanky. It's absolutely not going to be as tanky. Last thing that we want to look at is his Ascendancy, is that this Ascendancy is very, very powerful. The Necromancer Ascendancy is one of the most broken ones in the entire game. We've got Commander of Darkness, which is giving us not a lot here, honestly. This is probably something that he had to do. This 30% to elemental resistances is probably something he was kind of forced into doing, just because he needs those elemental resistances to be able to actually cap. If we swapped over to the Carcass Jack, it might make that a little bit easier, but would be Essence Glutton, right? Now this isn't really going to be too useful for him because he is mainly life, and it's not really going to give him much mana regen either, but if you do have mana problems, or you're going to be going the version of the build that's crit with hybrid and energy shield, Essence Glutton is actually really, really big for that. It gives you a ton of regeneration, gives you energy shield, mana, and increased maximum mana. So if you weren't going the version that he's going, and you're able to cap your resistances, it might be better than Commander of Darkness, but just slightly. Everything else here, this is not good, like the minion gem here, the minions deal more damage. None of the rest of this is good for this build, so these 3 points are absolute. You want Mistress of Sacrifice so that you can get the offering. You're using Bone Offering to get more block. That's how he's getting these block chances so high. And then you are using Plaguebringer. This gives you the ability to both deal more damage, and it makes it so that you have increased area of effect, and it also makes it so that nearby enemies deal reduced damage to you, just a good spell or a good skill. And then Corpse Pact is really the engine of this build, right? This gives you 30% increased damage if you consumed a corpse recently, which is always. It gives you the recursive attack and cast speed that you get from consuming and using corpses constantly through Spellbringer, or through Spellslinger, sorry. And then it also gives you enemies near corpses you spawned recently are chilled and shocked. So what that means, does he have that in his calculations? No, he doesn't. So it's probably 15% of shock, right? So he actually doesn't have that enabled, but enemies that he is hitting are chilled and shocked. That brings me to another point here. With the Volatile Dead, instead of Elemental Focus, we could do Hypothermia. How much is Hypothermia? So if we do Hypothermia, that's 39% more damage, 10% chance to freeze. So that would give you some chance to freeze, but that's about all that it would give you, right? So Hypothermia could be another option, but it's probably not great. That could give you some chance to freeze, but yeah. Other than that, I don't think there's much else that we can do for this build. This is really a build that is pretty solid already. There's not much that I can do, but like I said, there's those couple little things to look into. Mainly it's going to be changing out the helmet enchant and taking off the concentrated effect on the Desecrate. So it's probably not super useful, and that gives us enough mana to be able to do everything else that we're wanting to do, right? Or change out that helmet enchant. That's really gonna be it, guys. Very solid build. I'll link this down in the description so you can check this out if you'd like to as well. There's not much changes that I had to make. It's a pretty solid build. We've got 6k life, a ton of block. He probably takes almost no damage. He's got good resistances, good defensives, good regeneration, good damage. Everything here is really, really solid. A good build, Envy. Thanks for submitting it. I know it took a little bit to get this one out to you, but we're gonna work through them now. And yeah, that's gonna be it, guys. Take care. Remember, if you want more information on how to get your build reviewed, check out my Discord, find the channel called Build Review. It's got all the information in there. And other than that, I'll see you guys next time. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this. Take care, guys. Stay safe out there in raid class, and I'll see you guys in the next video.